You're listening to Underground USA News.
Monday, August 24, 2025. In the wake of California's devastating wildfires, a China-based company has been quietly purchasing incinerated properties, particularly in prime Malibu beachfront areas, raising concerns about foreign investment in vulnerable communities. While local officials, including Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass, promised swift rebuilding efforts, bureaucratic delays and unfulfilled pledges have left homeowners struggling. With only 161 permits issued for over 6,000 destroyed homes, critics question whether these sales can or should be halted, citing national security and local economic implications, as the state grapples with a housing crisis exacerbated by fire damage and regulatory hurdles. This trend echoes broader fears of foreign entities capitalizing on disaster-stricken regions, potentially undermining American property ownership and recovery efforts. A Chinese-linked company has reportedly acquired significant acreage in New Hampshire, prompting calls for stricter oversight of such transactions to protect U.S. interests. This purchase, part of a broader pattern of Chinese entities snapping up U.S. farmland and strategic properties, highlights potential risks to food security and national defense, as these holdings could facilitate espionage or economic leverage amid escalating tensions between Washington and Beijing. Conservative voices emphasize the need for robust federal safeguards, arguing that allowing adversarial nations to control American land undermines sovereignty and invites undue foreign meddling in critical regions like New England. While proponents of open markets downplay the threats, the move aligns with recent bipartisan efforts to scrutinize foreign investments, though implementation remains inconsistent. President Trump's aggressive federal crime crackdown in Washington, D.C., has resulted in over 1,000 arrests and 12 consecutive days without a homicide, a stark contrast to the city's earlier struggles with rising violence. U.S. Attorney Jeanine Pirro announced that the operation, which includes National Guard and federal agencies like the FBI and DEA, has removed 111 illegal guns from the streets, enhancing public safety and deterring criminal activity. Critics, including Chicago's mayor, have questioned the approach, but supporters argue it's a necessary response to years of lax policies that fueled crime spikes, offering D.C. residents a renewed sense of security. The initiative, sparked by an executive order targeting cashless bail, signals a broader push for law and order that could extend to other cities. President Trump has proposed deploying National Guard troops to Baltimore, Maryland, to address what he describes as a crime disaster, sparking a heated debate with Governor Moore. In a social media post, Trump offered federal assistance to curb the city's high crime rates, drawing parallel to his recent deployments in Los Angeles and Washington, D.C. Moore, appearing on Face the Nation, called the proposal unsustainable and unconstitutional, citing the 10th Amendment and the high costs of such operations. Trump's remarks also included a jab at Moore's governance, suggesting he might reconsider federal funding for the Francis Scott Key Bridge repair amid their ongoing feud. Critics argue this move could set a precedent for federal overreach, while supporters see it as a bold step to restore order in struggling cities. The U.S. Department of Agriculture has announced the termination of federal subsidies for solar energy projects on high-quality farmland, aiming to prevent the conversion of productive agricultural land into energy installations and safeguard the nation's food security amid rising global demands. This decision reverses prior incentives under the Inflation Reduction Act that encouraged such developments, prioritizing traditional farming over expansive solar farms that critics argue erode rural economies and inflate food prices. Officials emphasize that while renewable energy remains important, it should not come at the expense of arable soil essential for crops and livestock. Conservative voices have praised the policy as a pragmatic step to bolster self-reliance in agriculture, countering what they see as overzealous green agendas that overlook rural America's backbone. The change is expected to redirect resources toward genuine conservation efforts that benefit working farmers without compromising output. Approximately 600 Centers for Disease Control and Prevention employees have been terminated as part of a broader Department of Health and Human Services restructuring plan initiated under the Trump administration. The layoffs, finalized after a federal court ruling in Rhode Island protected some CDC divisions but allowed cuts in others, aimed to refocus the agency on its core mission of addressing epidemics and outbreaks according to HHS statements. Critics, including the American Federation of Government Employees, argue the cuts, which notably affect violence prevention programs, come at a critical time and may weaken public health efforts, while supporters see the restructuring as a necessary step to enhance efficiency and accountability in federal health operations. New York Governor Kathy Hochul faces mounting criticism for reportedly diverting billions in taxpayer funds to support illegal immigrants through sanctuary policies, while local communities struggle with strained public services and rising costs. Critics argue these funds could better address pressing issues like infrastructure, education, and public safety for New Yorkers. Hochul's administration has also been accused of manipulating census data to favor Democrat representation, raising concerns about political motivations over fiscal responsibility. This approach has sparked frustration among residents who feel their needs are being sidelined in favor of non-citizens. President Trump has signed executive orders targeting the elimination of cashless bail practices across the United States, emphasizing that such policies have contributed to rising crime rates by allowing repeat offenders to be released without consequences. This initiative builds on Trump's long-standing criticism of lenient bail reforms, particularly in Democrat-led cities, where he argues they have exacerbated urban decay and public safety risks, aiming to empower states and federal agencies to prioritize detention for serious criminals while protecting the rights of law-abiding citizens. Supporters view this as a common-sense step toward tougher law enforcement aligning with conservative principles of personal responsibility and community protection, though critics on the left decry it as overly punitive. Nonetheless, the orders signal Trump's intent to swiftly address what he calls a failed experiment in progressive criminal justice policies upon his return to office. In a move aimed at streamlining operations and enhancing accountability within the Department of Veterans Affairs, the agency has officially terminated collective bargaining rights for its unionized workforce, a decision that underscores a conservative emphasis on reducing bureaucratic hurdles to better serve America's veterans. This policy shift, effective immediately, applies to approximately 250,000 VA employees and is expected to eliminate mandatory negotiations on matters like working conditions and dispute resolutions, allowing for quicker implementation of reforms to address long-standing issues such as staffing shortages and delayed care. Proponents argue that this will foster a more responsive environment, aligning with broader efforts to prioritize mission-critical outcomes over union-driven delays. Though critics from labor groups warn of potential impacts on employee morale and service quality, this development reflects a pragmatic approach to government efficiency, potentially setting a precedent for other federal agencies grappling with similar challenges. A protest at an Arlington, Virginia school board meeting, where Lieutenant Governor Winsome Earl-Sears spoke against transgender bathroom policies, turned controversial when a woman displayed a sign reading, "Hey Winsome, if trans can't share your bathroom, then blacks can't share my water fountain." The sign, widely condemned as racist, was linked to a volunteer for opponent Abigail Spanberger's gubernatorial campaign, prompting swift backlash from Republicans, including Sears, who called it emblematic of the tolerant left's hypocrisy. Spanberger denounced the sign as repulsive and unacceptable, but critics, including Sears, criticized her delayed response, noting the sign was visible for an hour without objection from Democrat attendees. The incident has intensified scrutiny of Spanberger's campaign, and its supporters raising questions about political rhetoric and accountability in Virginia's heated gubernatorial race. Elon Musk's companies, xAI and X Corporation, have launched a federal lawsuit in Texas against Apple and OpenAI, accusing them of monopolistic practices and an illegal conspiracy to dominate the AI market on smartphones. The suit claims Apple's exclusive partnership with OpenAI, integrating ChatGPT into iOS, unfairly restricts competition by limiting iPhone users' access to alternative AI chatbots like xAI's Grok, stifling innovation and consumer choice. Musk argues that Apple's App Store policies favor OpenAI, making it nearly impossible for competitors to achieve top rankings, a practice he calls a clear antitrust violation. This legal action underscores growing concerns about big tech's control over digital marketplaces and its impact on free market competition. In a concerning development for public health and border vigilance, U.S. officials have confirmed the nation's first case of travel-associated human screwworm infection, stemming from a traveler who recently returned from Central America, highlighting potential vulnerabilities in international travel protocols amid ongoing regional outbreaks. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention identified the case in a person who developed symptoms after exposure to the parasitic fly larvae in an endemic area, with the infection treated successfully, but underscoring the need for heightened awareness and screening measures to prevent further spread into the U.S. This incident follows a screwworm eradication program in the Americas that has largely succeeded, but faces resurgence risks due to climate and migration factors, prompting conservative voices to call for stronger border health inspections to safeguard American communities without overreacting to isolated events. Experts emphasize that while the risk to the general population remains low, prompt reporting and medical intervention are crucial, as the screwworm can cause severe tissue damage if untreated. In a stark reflection of Europe's ongoing immigration challenges, foreign nationals now constitute the majority of inmates in Austria's prisons, with data revealing that 52% of the prison population hails from outside the country, prompting conservative observers to question the sustainability of lenient border policies and their downstream effects on public safety. This surge, largely attributed to unchecked migration flows from conflict zones and economic migrants, has strained correctional resources and highlighted a failure in integration efforts, as many offenders are repeat criminals who entered illegally or overstayed visas. Austrian authorities report that this demographic imbalance not only exacerbates overcrowding, but also underscores the need for stricter enforcement to protect native citizens, echoing broader conservative calls across the continent for a return to sovereignty-focused immigration controls before such trends destabilize social order further. While some progressive voices downplay the figures as coincidental, the data aligns with patterns seen in neighboring nations, fueling debates on whether open border idealism is yielding to harsh realities. In a striking display of cultural tension, the historic Turku Cathedral in Finland, one of the nation's oldest and most revered Christian sites, has become the focal point of controversy after Islamist groups were permitted to raise Islamic flags alongside the traditional Finnish and church banners during a multicultural event, prompting widespread criticism from conservative voices who view it as an erosion of Christian heritage in Europe. Reports indicate that this act, intended to promote interfaith dialogue, has instead ignited backlash from local Christians and nationalists who argue it symbolizes the creeping Islamization of sacred spaces, amid Finland's ongoing immigration debates, with some labeling it a deliberate provocation against the country's long-standing Lutheran traditions. Conservative commentators emphasize that while tolerance is a virtue, such concessions risk diluting national identity, without reciprocal respect from participating groups, urging Finnish authorities to prioritize the preservation of historic Christian symbols in response to public outcry. This incident underscores broader concerns in Scandinavia about balancing multiculturalism with cultural preservation, as similar events have fueled debates on sovereignty and religious precedents. Lieutenant Colonel Konstantin Frolov, once celebrated as the executioner for his sniper prowess in Russia's war against Ukraine, faces serious fraud charges after allegedly orchestrating a $2.5 million scheme involving staged combat injuries. According to reports, Frolov ordered his elite 83rd Separate Guards Air Assault Brigade soldiers to shoot him and each other, carefully avoiding vital organs, to claim substantial injury payouts from the Kremlin. This scandal, uncovered by a whistleblower in 2024, also implicates former brigade commander Artem Gorodilov, with at least 35 officers reportedly pocketing nearly $40,000 each while avoiding combat. Frolov's actions, including illegal weapons trafficking, tarnish his 4 orders of courage and reveal a troubling betrayal of military honor and public trust. French Prime Minister François Bayrou has announced a high-stakes confidence vote on September 8, 2025, to push through a €43.8 billion budget reduction plan, aimed at addressing France's spiraling public debt, which reached 5.8% of GDP last year, nearly double the EU's 3% limit. This aggressive fiscal strategy, including controversial proposals to eliminate 2 public holidays and freeze welfare spending, has drawn fierce opposition from both left-wing and far-right parties who threaten to topple his minority government. Bayrou, backed by President Emmanuel Macron, argues that the nation's financial stability is at stake, warning that inaction could lead to a Greek-style economic crisis or IMF intervention. The move, seen as a courageous stand for fiscal responsibility, risks plunging France into further political turmoil, if the vote fails, potentially forcing snap elections in an already fractured parliament. In a glimmer of humanitarian progress amid the protracted Russia-Ukraine war, both nations have executed another prisoner exchange, freeing hundreds of captives on each side, and underscoring the potential for diplomatic gestures, even as military tensions persist. This development, reported widely, highlights the fragile balance between combat operations and efforts to mitigate human suffering, with conservative observers noting it as a pragmatic step that could pave the way for broader negotiations without compromising national security interests. The exchange involved the return of soldiers and civilians, reflecting ongoing international pressure for de-escalation, while Russia maintains its resolve against perceived Western encroachments in the region. In a pragmatic move to de-escalate tensions along its northern border, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has signaled that Israel would consider a phased withdrawal from southern Lebanon, provided Hezbollah fully disarms and ceases its threats, a development that underscores Israel's commitment to security while offering a pathway to regional stability without unnecessary prolonged occupation. This stance comes as part of ongoing diplomatic efforts following recent military actions against the Iran-backed militia, with Netanyahu emphasizing that such a withdrawal would align with UN Resolution 1701, which calls for Hezbollah's disarmament and the deployment of Lebanese forces in the area. Conservative observers view this as a responsible strategy that prioritizes Israel's defense interests, avoids the pitfalls of endless entanglements, and pressures adversaries to fulfill international obligations, potentially paving the way for lasting peace if Hezbollah complies. This announcement highlights Netanyahu's balanced approach to countering terrorism while respecting diplomatic frameworks.
You're listening to Underground USA News.